let's start with in the days leading up to Hurricane Katrina, once it became clear that the storm was going to make landfall somewhere in the New Orleans area. Uh, can you talk about the steps that you took and the plans that you made to try to make sure that the 300 or so student athletes that were entrusted to your care
Mhm.
were all accounted for, and that you had a plan of action for how the department was going to function as this storm began to bear down on New Orleans?
Yeah, Dave, that triggers, I mean, so many thoughts, now that it's 20 years. I do very much so. In fact, I just left a meeting here at the University of Tulsa where I mentioned that we'd be doing this uh, chat together and uh, just preparing myself mentally for everything that all the thoughts, memories, feelings that went into everything all of us experienced 20 years ago, which uh, was unprecedented in a lot of ways, as you mentioned, and historic and tragic, a lot of things. But specific back to the planning, interestingly, in 2005, I'm gonna say, if I recall correctly, this may have been like the third evacuation that had occurred at the time. I'd come in April of 2000, so between then and August of '05. I think it was probably at least the third evacuation we've done. So we'd become pretty efficient at doing that. The difference in this one, David, particular, I think the other two or three is those had actually happened when we were in the school year during a term. And so we were dealing with the entire group. In this instance, we were, I believe, less than a week out from the start of classes. So the athletes that were on campus at that time were all of our fall sport athletes, roughly about 200
Mhm.
of our population was there. And so that at the start was the main difference. We were into summer camp or the fall training camp rather. And we'd always had preparation of, depending on the path of the storm, of the options of where we could locate. And that's what a lot of our staff administration in athletics was involved in, was as we were tracking that storm. Our destination at that point, given as we got days into it, was Jackson State. One of the former provosts at Tulane at the time was president of Jackson State. And when it looked like that would be our best response and reaction was to go north, we moved the entire operation towards Jackson State, evacuated all those fall sport teams. I stayed back through the entire piece, really until late Sunday. In part, I believe that Saturday, if I have my days and time frame right, storm hit on Monday. That Saturday, we had evacuated all of our teams, several charter buses that moved up. We had worked with both Millsap and Jackson State to make arrangements for practice facilities. I remember at one point sending out some associate ADs where we purchased literally every blow up mattress between New Orleans and Memphis. And because our accommodations we were given the field house of Jackson State to put our students. And I stayed back with Scott Cowan because that same weekend coincided with the welcoming of the freshman class and their families, the move-in period for them, and which came in ahead of the rest of the students. So it was literally, we were there on Friday handing it, participating and handing out welcome and orientation packages. On Saturday, we're giving them evacuation packages. By Sunday, we had helped most of those people reroute. And remember, and Tulaneans will appreciate this, these are kids from all 50 states and maybe 70 to 80 international countries. So it wasn't just like, okay, drive back home to Baton Rouge or, to
Right.
Shreveport. So once we completed that, and then I joined our athletic staff, coaches, and the athletes in in Jackson, Mississippi. We're doing mass feedings from Kentucky Fried Chickens and places like that, and then they're going to sleep on blown up mattresses. So that's the setting and context of where it all started.
One of the things that, at the time that Katrina hit, I was living in Madison, Wisconsin, and so just tracking it through my family that lived in Baton Rouge, and then family members that lived here in New Orleans. And one of the things I remember was just the challenge of seeing people sit on the interstate, sitting on the highways as they were attempting to get out of town and get out of the way of a storm. As you talk about exiting on that Sunday evening to get to Jackson, the roads were clear by that time point. Did you run into any of that as you were exiting, or was it open by then?
It had begun. The opening process had begun. A lot of that initial bottlenecking and log jams of traffic, particularly going west. I-10 was my wife and uh, three of our four children all evacuated to Houston initially, and so did about 500,000 others. And so
Mhm.
that first group and wave, that I mean, the 5.5 hour trek to Houston became a 20 to 25 hour trek, and uh, that most of that had occurred by that late Sunday night where I headed out. Of course, I was uh, heading north to Jackson, so that was part of it, was the route. I would say late Sunday afternoon. Most of my time had been on campus. I think I ran home to our home in Uptown, took a quick shower, grabbed a suitcase full of, not a lot. Most of us left with the idea we'd be back in, 48 hours, 72 at the most. And of course, that quickly changed.
So I don't know exactly uh, when in the process this happened, but at some point, Tulane makes the decision to cancel the fall semester.
Right.
Athletics, there's a decision made to go forward and have student athletes across teams, teams that were competing during that fall, compete. Can you talk about the decision behind um, deciding that athletics was going to compete, and why you felt, and others that maybe you consulted with, felt that it was important that the student athletes compete during that semester when the university ultimately was closed?
David, that's really the threshold question. And, one that I've lived with now for 20 years of, did we make the right decision? And on and the answer varies, honestly. Let me just go first in the manner that you asked it first, about kind of the backdrop of how all of it happened. So going back to the how did we evacuate? We leave town, with all of our fall sports teams, thinking we're just out of pocket for 24, 48 hours, and we, as we had previously other times, returned back and resumed normal activities. First, in that 4 days we were in Jackson, at the end of the second day, we lost power too, because by then Katrina had hit landfall, moved northward, and hit Jackson, I believe, the day after it hit, made landfall on the Gulf, and knocked out power there. So things really got chaotic at that point. I can recall having to pull the whole group together, uh, especially in the middle of the night where you lose all power, air conditioning, all those things, and just keeping calm and telling, the young people, we're going to get through this. We're about to secure generators and temporary power, all these things that you're dealing with. By the Thursday following the Monday storm, first part of losing power was not only the electrical, we had no cell service. What we learned after a short amount of time were the only cell service that was remaining were from our out-of-state student athletes that had plans that were tied back to networks outside of the region that had been damaged. So we confiscated most of those phones so we could set up a command center and be able to communicate to the outside world. By that Thursday, one of our football student athletes, a young man, his family uh, owned and operated a transportation company in Dallas, was able to send not just for us, but by that time, I think we had upwards of 500 regular Tulane students that were also uh, had evacuated to Jackson and Jackson State's campus. I remember the family sending over about 20 charter buses to evacuate us out of there because Jackson was damaged without power. So it was like our second rescue that had happened in Jackson. And for a lot of the kids, the students, we were able to get them to airports in Memphis and other places to fly out and fly home. And for our student athletes, we had made the decision that we would go to Dallas as kind of a holding station. We worked with Britt Banowski and Judy McLeod at the Conference USA office to get us a location, the DoubleTree, right right in the vicinity of SMU's campus, right off I-75, basically for all of our 200 student athletes and staff, really as a holding pattern because we'd literally been in the dark for about 48 hours. And just to know all these decisions that later came to fruition about what's going to happen with the university, what's next. We needed to be in a position where we could first be safe and two communicate. And so all that's unfolding in warp speed, kind of a schedule. And I would say we were there a little over a week, and it was somewhere in that second week or the end of the first week where Scott Cowan, who had stayed back on campus the entire time, had relocated to Houston and kind of assembled his administrative team around him down in Houston to start tackling the challenge of what's next for Tulane. And we maintained our status through that first week in Dallas. We had made arrangements. SMU, Gerald Turner, their president, reached out anything we needed with our teams that they could accommodate. The whole city of Dallas poured out. I mean, we had loads of supplies and things coming in to take care of our student athletes. It was like a mass unit. The hotel had given us the entire ballroom. We're checking in. I mean, everything from fresh bananas to toothpaste and underwear. That's what was going on that first week. Somewhere in the second week, I made the trek down to Houston to visit with Scott Cowan. I drove down. Prior to that, I'd been speaking with our coaches, our fall sport coaches that were with us about what we thought, wanted to hear directly from them. I also spoke with our student athletes, called a lot of our senior student athletes from the different sports together to really see, look, that doesn't look like at this point we're going to be able to return to New Orleans. How critical is it from their perspective that we stay together and try to find an alternative way to, one, stay together, and two, continue to compete at a time that the city and our university is shut down. And so the overwhelming consensus was that we, at all measures, we had to stay together. We had to stay connected. And I think part of it is the athletic mindset. Part of it was adrenaline. We'd been through already what had first become what we thought was a somewhat normal activity for us every couple of years, evacuating to a national worldwide story, being in the dark and then re-entering and realizing the magnitude of what had actually happened. All those things kind of came descending on us at once. But I remember driving down and telling Scott that a meeting with him, and of course he's dealing with much greater, and I can appreciate that now even more sitting in this seat today. But I said, I think, Scott, I said, first of all, we've been in communication. We had set up a war room. One of my associate ADs, Scott Sidwell, at a little war room in our hotel room, and daily we're going over every detail of things that needed to happen and just triaging for the day. Do we have food? Do we have room? Okay, then we move to the next thing. Do we have a facility for a team to practice? Do we have transportation? All those things. And that's all we could do was triage day by day. But I remember saying to Scott, I said, I think we can pay. I understand what's at play. We're good. We're going to be fine, whatever you decide. But know that we've got this. We can, we're unified. We will. Our preference is to keep our teams together, and we've had a number of universities reach out about potentially hosting us until our status and things are clarified, and hosting our teams and staffs. I think we can, we have the semblance of a plan that we can put together, and I think we can serve a greater purpose. And I said, look, the entire city, as well as this 180-year-old university, is shut down for the first time in its history. We think we can serve the purpose of, by being visible, by competing on the national stages that college athletics provides, that we can keep fresh in everyone's mind the devastation, the tragedy, everything that's occurred. We won't let them forget it, and that's the purpose and role we think we can play. And from that, he greenlighted, had enough confidence in us to greenlight us, to allow him and the rest of his staff to focus on what do we do to survive? What do we do towards working towards reopening, all these things. And that's when our journey began.
So as you look back on that time, you get with the president, the decision is made that Tulane is best served by having student athletes in its athletics departments function in the best way possible going forward. And so now, from my understanding, our teams end up getting, I don't know what the right word is, divided between several locations, I guess 4 different locations. And so as that happens, can you share a story or a moment during the semester that kind of sticks with you, as we have teams that are in 4 different locations competing, and specifically just thinking about, and you've mentioned it, the kind of the character and the resilience that the people of this city are known for. As you are managing student athletes in multiple areas, is there something that sticks with you that you can share with us that kind of displays the character and resilience of our student athletes in our department negotiating through this unprecedented situation?
Yeah, David, it was such a, every day was such a surreal experience. And I know for everyone, every aspect of whatever role we were in, just the nature of, daily, everything that had happened in our city for weeks on end to months, were the lead stories of every local national broadcast that went on, as we know, for weeks and months. And knowing that, and yet at the same time, we're trying to do something unprecedented, but normal, what student athletes would normally be doing, but doing it for a higher purpose. One of the things, and I don't even realize where it came from, things were so chaotic and fluid, whether it was from student athletes or staff or whatever, we developed the kind of the mantra or motto of uh, be the face, represent the name, carry the torch. That was our role. We had patches that were worn on the sleeve of uniform of every student athlete that competed that fall. And so that was the thing that rallied us. That was the motive and the impetus of what sent us off on this jersey or this journey. And so many things. I mean, the original plan that had happened on that same trip where I went to Houston to visit with Scott Cowan about actually embarking on this journey, we had communications with both Rice and Houston, who were both conference member affiliates and Conference USA, of hosting us. And that way we would be around university leadership every day. All of us, all of Tulane would be located in Houston. We even had a branch campus of our business office, a business college there. But through that very same weekend that we had put the plan together, the proliferation and the whole exodus of all of New Orleans and South Louisiana that evacuated, that was probably the primary destination of where most of it. So all housing options at both campuses were evaporated literally before our eyes in a weekend. Less than 24 hours later, because of these calls, we circled back to all those calls, having been by that time a 15, 18-year athletic director. A lot of my peers had called, what can we do to help? What can we do to help? So Scott Sidwell and I got back on the horn and said, called A&M, called Tech. SMU's right there in town with us, called Louisiana Tech, and came up with that plan B, which are, okay, let's reset the journey. Instead of Houston as a location, then it became that 4-campus approach, but still within a footprint we could manage. And so that was how that part launched. But to see it so dramatically change in 24 hours was kind of, symptomatic of, okay, that's what we're dealing with. Things were changing that significant, but that fast. And at the same time, we'd put out through our coaches and staff the message for all of our non-competing athletes, meaning the athletes that were in the sports that were not yet training. So the baseball team and the swimming and diving, the 2 basketball teams, all of those sports that weren't in training flew into Dallas, and then we deployed to the 4 settings. The entire group of the 16, 17 teams at that point. Part of the plan called for the staff that was available to us, as we put an associate athletic director who was kind of the campus coordinator of each campus. And then I kept a small group. Our business manager, Joe Cali, our SID, Donna Turner, our Travis Goff, who was our advancement person, maybe a group of about 5 around me in Dallas. And we were housed there. Britton and Judy created a suite that my understanding was they still today refer to that as the Tulane Suite within the Conference USA complex. And that's where we operated daily, and we would check in with each of our satellite campuses daily. And then a lot of our time was focused on, one, making sure that the arrangements that we had made with each of those institutions for our student athletes, just well-being, feeding them, housing them, the ability for them to utilize their facilities and venues to practice and compete. We all had to take a back seat, as you would expect. So we had teams practicing at 5 a.m. and some at 10 o'clock at night in order to access these venues. And but all those host campuses were wonderful to us, beyond anything imaginable. And at the same time, our staff was making arrangements for our ability to continue for all those fall sports, our ability to host events. And even when they were a so-called home event, if our host campus couldn't do it, then we'd have to find a neutral site or somewhere to do that. In some instances, we didn't even have the gear and information. I remember getting word out both to some of the suppliers, but even universities. I remember my friend Jim Livengood from University of Arizona drop shipped our women's volleyball uniforms as blanks. And I remember loading my wife Brenda's car up with a box of uniforms that we'd just gotten. The Tulane logo had the patch sewn on and numbers on the back, boxes of that, along with cross-country things, loading up the back of her car, and off she went to College Station. It was like Little League weekend duty. And that's, like you pull up in the van and pull out the boxes and start throwing the jerseys out so they could go compete. But that fundamentally was the nature of how we had to just triage by day in order to pull this off.
Now, you mentioned initially that when the evacuation happens, your wife and kids evacuate to Houston as you go with the teams to Jackson. On a personal note, I'm wondering how you're managing your personal life and family during this time period. I'm sure no one at this time is probably asking about how you're doing and going on. Everybody's worried about the teams and the student athletes, as it should be. But I wonder, at what point did your family reunite throughout all of this? Because you talked about kind of being based out of Dallas and having that space. So did your family come to Dallas during that time period?
I think that at some point, Brenda and our four kids, and of course Kelly was with our daughter who was captain of the volleyball team, was with her volleyball team through the whole period. The other two daughters, one was their first year of law school, and then Casey, our other twin daughter, had just transferred that summer from University of Tulsa, which she was a member of the volleyball team, to Tulane, and was had medically hardship, so she was with the family. And then our son Doug, who was a freshman decathlete on the track team, and so initially they got to Houston, and then literally for over a week we weren't able to even get in contact. And finally, in fact, I would share you, Dave, one of the funny things. It's literally where I learned to text. That was right at the beginning of texting, and because of the cell service. And so what she reminds me, I only gave like a thumbs up as a "Are you okay?" A day's worth of messages, and I learned to text a thumbs up back in response.
You kept it simple. You were efficient.
Exactly. I was setting the tone early. All those things, like I can remember putting her in charge. This was while we still had the group of 200 in Dallas. One of our alums, Mr. Jim Wilson, right in the building you're at, I said, Jim, I've got 200 kids, and we don't even have, beyond their workout clothes and maybe one change of clothes, I can't even clothe them. Jim Wilson, who had one of Tulane icons and supporters, very successful developer, said, go across the expressway to the Northgate Mall, to the Dillards or whatever it may be, and be prudent, but clothe all your kids. So Brenda was in charge, along with a few of the coaches' wives. At each checkout stand, we'd given them a list. Okay, you go get your, necessities. You get two pair of khakis, 2 pair of shorts, 3 polos, whatever the list called for. And she was at the checkout stand with all of them, just making sure that's what was occurring. I know the check that was written was over 6 figures just to outfit student athletes, so that they had, that's how bare bones basic our starting point was through this whole thing.
And that's a piece that you don't think about quite as much in all of this, is that because you left thinking it's a hurricane, we're going to be gone for a day, maybe a couple of days, and then return. no one has in any way anything that prepares them for the length of time that you're going to be gone. So wherever you ended up, you were really starting from scratch with just the basics of what you needed to be able to live every day.
That's exactly it, David. And that really, just what you're saying is set the tone of how we needed to approach every day. Is, we had to be, the first priority had to be that we were embarking on something that had never been done. In hindsight, I look back and ask myself, was it the right thing? And in a lot of ways, you could answer, with two answers. Yes, I don't think Tulane would. I don't think Tulane athletics would be where it is today. I don't think the recovery of Tulane and New Orleans would have gone as well. I think the purpose and mission that we set out to accomplish which was to, be the face, represent the name, and carry the torch, was successful beyond belief, because it did its intended purpose, which was to keep at the forefront throughout the country. People have suffered. And even in spite of that, look at these young people demonstrating the fighting spirit, competitive spirit, to not only survive, but overcome whatever challenge, in this case, the biggest, natural disaster, some called man-made disaster in history, in U.S. history. And yet here we are and leading the way. I don't think without that, any of the wonderful things that have happened since would have ever occurred, or they wouldn't have occurred in this time frame. Yet what, there was a toll. Uh, the hardships, the short term, for those that took on this challenge. I'll never forget what I call my D-Day, or worst day, which was, I believe, December 8th, when I had to make the rounds that day. The university had a press conference. Campus, the city had reopened. Campus hadn't yet, but the board and Scott Cowan were now back in New Orleans, had made the decision. Yes, we will reopen. It'll be down the road a couple months. But in order to do so, here's what has to happen. 50% of the campus, faculty, staff, programs, majors, and athletics had been suspended or eliminated. And to go on that same day, December 8th, and deliver that message, on those four campuses, that for someone that's been in it, David, and you're this way too, for the opportunities for young people to get to compete, to get to develop, to get to achieve all these things, and then to be in the role of saying, you've done something miraculous and unprecedented, but unfortunately that time is over. That was a day I'll never wish on anyone, never want to repeat for myself, certainly never want to repeat for those young people. But yet that was the outcome. And, that in itself is a remarkable story. Tulane did what they should have, which was honored all those kids' scholarships. The NCAA did what they should, which was to allow any of them to transfer without penalty. The remarkable thing was how few actually did. Even young people that were freshman student athletes chose to stay and be part of Tulane, and they had opportunities to go elsewhere. And, but that place meant that much to them. And we embraced them, brought them in-house. I put Sue Bauer, an associate AD, over that. We called that group our green team. They worked in the department, served in multiple capacities, from event management to business office, compliance, everywhere needed, because we'd lost many staff by then. We wouldn't have got back on our feet without those young people. But part of that was them having to forfeit their opportunity to compete. And so that's, beyond the logistics challenges, the mental anguish, those things that occurred, that's the reality is half that group lost their ability to compete as student athletes at Tulane. And the remarkable response was how many, which was the majority, stayed to actually complete their tenure and degrees there. That, along with the others you asked about the resilience, what all of them did was remarkable beyond belief. To this day, it's something that, as you could see, still struggle to recount it. We all lived it. Uh, I do still struggle with, did even though I executed it, did I do the right thing? For any of those kids and young men and women that suffered emotional toll and so forth for trying to do that uh, exercise that I led. I will forever be indebted. Um, I'll carry some guilt that maybe I too acted out of adrenaline and feeling like we could provide a bigger purpose. And even to that point, David, that's why it was so important for me to stay at Tulane through that period, that next decade. And I'll never forget, the important thing to me was people say, well, and I know people externally don't truly know, it's shouldn't expect them to, because till you've endured or encountered something like this and actually know what happened and how it happened and all the daily things, challenges, obstacles that had to be overcome and met, uh, yet we stayed the course and were able to complete it. I don't think Tulane, there would have been a period, who knows how long, whether it's a half decade, a decade or more, that we wouldn't have had sports. We would have just come off, that was less than 2 years when we'd first survived a year-long determination of, should we have sports? Should we have Division I sports or Division III sports? Those type of things. So we were very fragile anyway. And then with this happening, it would have been very understandable. In fact, I don't know how you, even as an athletic director, if they had decided to pull the plug and tell us, don't compete, don't stay together, when we reform ourselves and reset ourselves and recover, then we'll tackle bringing back athletics. That could have easily been the decision of Scott Cowan and the board. And we all know that's easier said than done. You just don't turn the switch on. It'd probably taken a decade to bring back our athletic programs. And because of those kids and staff and effort, that was seamless. Took us many years to get up and running and more competitive again. It also led to the success of the campaign we ran, that I would say for the first time in who knows how long. People need to look hard and long and understand the change that occurred. And it changed, that happened with the leadership through the board of recognizing what these young people did. And I think it caused a seismic shift that athletics transcends beyond just scoreboards at a time where our existence was in peril and in doubt. The one flag still standing and waving wildly and brightly was Tulane Athletics. And doing that not only helped create, keep a spirit alive and the country's awareness, it also became a galvanizing charge for that university, starting with Scott Cowan, starting with that board. And there had been a lot of mixed feeling and belief in that. Going through that the way they did, handling it in the manner they did, and then even the way they dealt and faced the aftermath and outcome of what had actually happened, wasn't just that 6 months. young people, that worked their whole lives to be there and have that opportunity, had it snatched. I still have to look at one of them today, who was my freshman son, Doug, who was a decathlete. And I'm gonna never forget coming up to me at A&M and saying, "Dad, I thought we were tight." And I looked at him and said, "Doug, it's not personal." And s I don't think I can say the PG version of what he said in response, but it was very personal, and it was for all of those young people. I still see um, their faces, um, tears and pain, all those things. Uh, and David, the whole thing is, those are the heroes. Those are the heroes. Tulane, their great pride today and what it is, what it's accomplishing. It was done on the shoulders of these heroes, and those young people were the heroes. It's why we have it. It's why the university committed to it at a level that it never had. It's why they greenlighted us to go uh, really attract the support and funding to build the footprint and facilities we have there now. It's what gave us the impetus. It was the same message that I use for conference expansion to get us into, at the time, the Big East, that's now the American. All those things stemmed from the resilience, perseverance, actions of these young people. In 2015, I remember insisting to our campus Hall of Fame committee, there's a group here that will never, ever properly be honored and remembered. And it's these 300 young people who endured and persevered and overcame something, and we all celebrate and enjoy the fruits of their sacrifice. Um, and I wanted them recognized and inducted as a class, the Katrina class, into the Hall of Fame. That was the night of healing for all those young people to come back from all over the country and the world to be together again and recognize and see and feel firsthand. We did it in the new stadium in 2015, and let them know that those sacrifices actually resulted in something much greater than they would have ever imagined. And I remember driving home that night with my wife, Brenda, and saying, that's, that's it. That's the reason we stayed. Now we're done. We can stop because now it's been made right again. And anyway, that's that period.
Rick, you mentioned having some uncertainty about whether or not the right decision was made during that time period. As someone who sits in this chair now and in many ways is benefiting from what happened before me and then trying to set the table for those who will come after, I can't put into words the level of gratitude and appreciation that I think all of us have, the indebtedness that we have to you, your staff, the coaches, and those student athletes during that time period, because I agree with you from a standpoint of what was in the best interest of Tulane athletics going forward. Clearly, if there had been no competition that semester, those student athletes could have made completely different decisions about where they were going to go, transferring to other institutions, making other decisions, and everyone would have certainly understood that. And so when you do reassemble, are you reassembling with anything close to what you need to even be able to have a team, to have a program, to have coaches? And so while it certainly wasn't easy going through that time because you all made the decision to stay together and then come back together, it gave us an opportunity to continue to exist and continue to be together and continue to build. And so maybe we weren't as competitive as we wanted to be, but we were building on a foundation that had been given to us by these young people and what they had done. And you make a great point. Then on the heels of that, investments begin to be made that we see now from a facility standpoint that completely transform not just what we look like, but how we're able to function every day. And being able to tie that back to those young people, the leaders, the people who went through that day-to-day triage to get through an unprecedented time period, and what that allowed us to be able to do and what it allows us to be able to do now. We all stand on your shoulders, the shoulders of your staff and those student athletes who were rightfully put into the Hall of Fame. You could argue that their effort exceeds any athletic effort of anyone else that was in the Hall, just based on their grit and based on their sacrifice and their desire and willingness to stay together for a purpose that was bigger than them. So I said all that to say thank you. Um, it continues to pay dividends on this campus, in this environment, with our culture. And as much as people talk about the resilience of our city and the people that live here, you're right in that during that time period, Tulane Athletics represented the resilience of thousands of people who maybe were beginning to be forgotten about, or you weren't thinking about quite as much, or maybe they weren't showing up on TV the way that they were when the storm hit, but were still fighting their way back to a life that they had lost previously. In many ways, Tulane Athletics kept people from forgetting about that. You thought about Tulane, you thought about New Orleans, you thought about not only what people had suffered, but look at how they are fighting through this and still representing a city, a community, a region. And so thank you so much for that. That made a huge difference for all of us.
Well, thank you, David. It'll be, and I hope for all that were involved feel the same way that I do about it. Is probably wouldn't choose it again, uh, but given the choices, whether it was the right one or not, the fact that we stayed united, uh, comforted, supported, stood up for each other, stayed connected, and completed the race. I think it's one of the defining moments, I would say, of my life, not just career but life. I hope for the young people and staff and others that had to endure it and survive it, that it served a similar purpose. Um, it's just I know at a period where maybe it's the reason I'm still working. I don't know. Is it because I know, as you've seen today, reflecting on it is a mixed emotion thing. There's great pride. There is great anguish and a lot of things too. Just knowing in its entirety. I just hope that it served, beyond the Tulane purpose for each of these individuals that sacrificed, is that they found some uh, fulfillment, some pride, some sense of purpose of something greater, because that's what happened, and that's how it played out, and that their roles in it tie back into everything you so eloquently said, was that uh, it wouldn't be where it is, and wouldn't be having the success that it's having. And I want them to always remember their place in that, because it came at a high and painful price, but hopefully something they've been able to reconcile and come to terms with and know, and benefit in other areas of their life, which I know it's impacted me that way, and I hope for them it has as well.
As you look back on this time from the storm making landfall all the way through, let's say, coming back to campus and restarting things on campus, was there a moment that made you feel that not only would we get through this, but that we had an opportunity to emerge on the other end as a stronger department and stronger community?
You know, David, I would tell you honestly that took some time for everyone. Uh, Honestly, that spring, beyond the settling back in and getting through the physical damage, you know, our campus was damaged almost. I recall a figure of somewhere around $800 million of damage to our campus. So the enormity of dealing with that and knowing that the action that had been taken, which had suspended half of our programs, half of our staff, all those things, is it was still for a period of time, and I would say up to about 3 years, everything we could do to muster up the resources and support to be able to lift up just the 8 remaining programs. So I would say it was probably not until about 2008 when I don't recall what we dubbed it as. We had a rebirth plan, for lack of a better, can't think of the exact term we called it, that got board approval and laid out beginning in 2008. I believe over a 3 or 4 year period where we would reinstate our suspended programs. Once that decision and that plan was adopted, then that's where I felt like personally, and I think our whole organization started to feel, okay, we've got a direction, we've got a plan, we've got support to go achieve this. That's really when we started to get a different cadence than just being about survival. And I think you can correlate that to a lot of different tragedies, right? There's the trauma, the grief, and the hangover that comes from it, and then how do you redirect and reset and relaunch? And so I'm going to say beginning in 2008 and 9 did we really begin our relaunch, and then it really picked up steam because then year by year, as we added back more sports, I would say over a 4 year period, we brought them all back. We met every year. We had to submit reports to the NCAA, who had given us a waiver to remain in Division I during that time, even though we didn't meet the criteria. All those things. I can recall signing that last report saying we're back, we're whole again. That was significant, and that led to, okay, we've overcome this. And my messaging then to Scott, to the board, was, and just surviving's not enough. If we haven't proven anything during this period, is the fact that this resilience and this platform and this purpose goes beyond scoreboards. Look what these young people did during this time. And yet here we are. Now it's the time to get serious, to get committed. And that's what led really to that next half decade. We probably were able to raise more money, build more facilities, achieve more in terms of our conference. You know, I can remember putting together, David, there's somewhere lying around your office, presentations to the different opportunities to advance ourselves and things, and making the pitch that, you know, we've been off Broadway for 4 or 5 years, but we're back. And that's kind of the theme that we used in promoting. I know that's what led to us getting invited into the Big East that sometime, 9 months later became the conference we're both in today. All those things helped develop a cadence and momentum and a rhythm that wasn't there for a long, long period of way, even before me. Is we've got a destination, we've got a direction and an impetus, and we have the confidence of what we've done and overcome to help propel us there. And so that's kind of the overview, I think, of how all that transcended during that period was trauma and grief and loss, uh, but resolve and resilience that overcame and sustained and then began and relaunched into a new journey, a new era.
Rick, I suppose if you were going to add a piece of that puzzle, you could say coming out of it is also learning, right? And I wonder, would you feel like you learned about leadership through crisis, something that, people who sit in leadership positions like athletics directors across the country are in a position to do from time to time? I think all of us, if you were in an athletic director's position, went through the pandemic, which was a crisis like we hadn't
Mhm.
seen. The difference being we were all going through it. We could reach out to each other and kind of provide support about what was working on your campus that maybe wasn't working on mine, and we could all learn together. But this was something that was singular to Tulane. I
Yeah.
wonder what you feel like you learned about leadership through crisis that you could share that we as athletics directors or anybody in a leadership position could certainly learn from, but certainly within our industry.
That's insightful, David. And what you said was something like for years, all these years, kind of is embedded in the back of my mind yeah, it was not the only adversity people had ever faced, but it was certainly of significant magnitude, and we faced it alone. I was fortunate having been, I think at that time, a 12, 15-year AD, that I had peers out there that would reach out and just say, whatever it may be, basically wanting to lend support. I'll never forget Mike Garrett from USC calling early on, while we were still fresh right out of the evacuation and finally had relocated in Dallas and deployed teams and said, look, man, he said, I just said, Mike, I'm just going day to day, trying to outfit teams, feed them, get them to events and so forth. And he said, well, I'm directing my CFO to send $100,000 check to Tulane Athletics, and you'll get it today. He said, just tell us what else you need. Those kind of gestures and things, are unforgotten. And people, I think it's like we all learn, right, during times of trauma and tragedy, is that the best thing you can do is be available, be supportive, not stand back and sympathize, but engage. Don't be a bystander. Stand by rather than bystand. Stand by people when they're going through these things is important. I know an important thing for me, David, and spent that entire spring because we had to lay off over half of our staff. And then, of course, the student athletes, the group that had chosen to want to transfer and compete. I spent almost that entire spring on the phone, writing letters, whatever it took to help first those student athletes. They came to me and said they wanted to transfer. Could I help them and so forth? And making calls to ADs, in some instances, even coaches, of saying, look, you made one mistake not signing these kids the first time. You're getting a free opportunity to rescind that and redo it. Here's this great young, man or woman and so forth. And then, of course, the same thing with our staff. I felt obligated for those, not because of any shortcomings or misgivings that they hadn't been retained, just Tulane's ability to continue to employ the level of staffing that we had. I just felt it imperative that I help every single one of them land on their feet. And I did my best to do that through that entire spring. So that, I think it's a combination. You learn there's organizational responsibility, but there's also human responsibility. And so I tried to make sure I would not do one at the expense of the other. One thing for Tulane and Tulane Athletics to survive and move ahead, but doesn't have to be at the cost of individuals that were harmed along the way, whether it was a student athlete or a staff person. So I think those were important thoughts and decisions during that time for me. Um, I think I would just tell people is that you don't isolate yourself during that time. I was overwhelmed by I think the support from the industry directed our way. Um, I think a lot of those things, and I think something that helped us. In fact, it actually was a very important thread in the entire rebuild of Tulane. One of the things we did starting that next fall is something we'd already done. David, it used to be part of our NLIs, our letters of intent, and the letter we would sign is we required our student athletes to contribute X amount of hours of service, community service, during that period. It became a real rallying point, so much so that the next fall, Scott Cowan decided, he asked me about it, we discussed it. He made that a requirement of every returning student. All of a sudden, you had a workforce of over 14,000 young people that were significant, the largest individual group of any private public entity out there in rebuilding the city. And it helped become a huge catalyst in the whole regeneration of the university. It all of a sudden became, in those first couple of years where our enrollment, our admissions, our applications were damaged significantly because of the uh, concern that Tulane would survive, is all of a sudden it flipped. And by year two and year three, all of a sudden we were exceeding applications at double and triple the rate that they'd ever received in their entire history. And a lot of it was appealing to people wanting to first serve and help, but also be part of something bigger. And how many times in a lifetime will young people get to be part of rebuilding a city? And that became a rallying cry that too helped regenerate and create a resurgence for Tulane and the city at the same time. So all those things kind of in that order of let's clean up the damage and try to preserve and minimize the continued hurt going forward, but then begin the process of rebuilding. That's really the kind of the progression of actions and thoughts that were going on at that time.
As you recounted the conversation with Mike Garrett and what he said and what he did, it was kind of a reminder to me, whether it's been struggles that I've had in my own life or those that have been around me. It's just a reminder that sometimes the best thing that you can do to help someone who's going through something difficult is to make the decision to do something, whether it's been asked for or not. There are people who will say, I'm sorry you're going through a difficult time. Please let me know if there's anything that I can do. And then there are people who will say, I'm sorry you're going through a difficult time, and this is what I've done for you. Um,
Yeah.
you've had an issue, and so at 5 o'clock today, there's going to be dinner delivered to your home. You didn't ask for it, and because most of the time when people are going through crisis, they're not going to ask for anything, even if they
Right.
you. And so some of the people that are most significant are those who just make the decision, okay, if I were in this situation, this is probably something that I would need. So I'm just going to call and do it. I'm just going to send the check. I'm just going to send the food. I'm going to make the decision to do something. You made the decision, standing by versus being a bystander. I think that's something we can all learn from. I think anyone who's in a position to offer assistance is to be commended. But I think many times when you're going through something that was that traumatic and that overwhelming, just having people who made the decision to do something and they didn't even ask you about it, they just said, hey, we're sending something that's going to help. They had to really be special because they were showing their love through action at a time when you really needed it.
That's well said, David, and that's I mean, so, as you see and hear, we're 20 years later, but those gestures, those actions, those things, those words, thoughts, all of it were not haven't been and never will be forgotten, and I'm not the only one.
Speaking of being 20 years later, last question for you. You look back over the past 20 years and you see where Tulane Athletics is now. What are you most proud of when you look at where things stand here in 2025?
You know, I, I'm happy, pleased. Uh, I mean, I really look back. Came there at a time where some of my predecessors who have been good friends, Kevin White at Chet Gladchuck, Sandy Barber, and others that have been in the industry and succeeded. And I'll never forget a email, I think from Kevin and Sandy that I got at the time they were at Notre Dame together when we'd gone through this. And then at the end of my tenure, they were saying, just leave knowing, you've done a job well done, that all of us admired, respected, and tried to do as well. And I got to be there at a time that was, critical in its history and its survival. We were able to stand through it, persevere, fight through it. A couple of different instances, one determining the level of commitment and competition they wanted to compete at. It was a year-long ordeal. And then, of course, the storm and the damage it caused to the entire community, that whole area, all those things, for me, ended up being, defining moments of my tenure, life, career, any and all those things, David. And so I'm thankful first and have gratitude. And that was a place that pushed and challenged me to levels that I'd never been pushed and challenged ever. And I'm thankful for that. I think it revealed both strengths and weaknesses, right? But it tested me to the ultimate level. And you have to be thankful when that's happened. And I'll always be thankful of the greater community, starting with the Tulane community, nationwide, worldwide, that rallied like it never had. Just being a small part of the time, circumstance, place, and activities that occurred during that whole decade and a half that I was there. And then now coming out, helped it be poised to be where it is today, knowing that it carried the water for a long time, and to see it continue to be carried and move ahead, that whole sequence and progression is extremely satisfying, extremely fulfilled and happy for those that are still, getting to live on there. There's three places that'll always be near and dear to my heart, all the places where I've been an athletic director. There's two that stand at the top of that, and that is Tulane. And then, of course, where I'm at today, my alma mater at Tulsa, for very different reasons. And, but they'll both be at the top throughout that entire period. So that's for me personally. Just from my outside perspective looking in, is everything that maybe for half of a century that Tulane had somewhat lost its way or lost the appreciation and understanding of what athletics done right could do for its university, a community. And now to see it in the position where that, has rallied so much support and galvanized for all the purposes of what Tulane is, not just athletics, but a world-class university. It's the economic engine of that whole community and region, worldwide branding, all those things. athletics has played a significant role in that, and it's something people like you and I always believe is possible. But now seeing it play out goes way beyond, trophies and championships. It's about elevating an entire community, and that's a big part of what occurred to that time and is continuing to develop and grow and prosper as time goes on.
Well, we want to continue to do that work to elevate the community, and I hope that as that happens over, the upcoming years, that you continue.
Well, you're on a great roll. Keep it going.
Well, we want to keep it going, and I think our ability to do that um, will always be tied back to the work, the sacrifices, the time, the energy put in by so many that came before us, and you and your staff and the student athletes during that time, during that tragedy, during that unprecedented event, stand at the top of the list. Certainly, when we look at where we stand today, as far as how we got to this point, the foundation that was laid, and the work that was done. So, on behalf of all of us that are benefiting from what happened during that time period, thank you. We come to work every day to hopefully make you and others that came before us proud. We want this to continue to move in a positive direction. And we want to set the foundation for those that'll come after us the way that it was done by people like you. So thank you again, Rick, and thank you for your time. I know this was more time than maybe we thought it was going to take to go through this, but time very well spent. I think certainly on my end, just being able to hear and learn from your experiences. But thank you for being so generous with your time and sharing what I know was at times emotional and difficult to get through, but certainly meaningful for all of us to be able to hear.
Well, you're more than welcome, David. I'm so appreciative that you're there and have an appreciation of Tulane, its history, its importance, and the work you're doing and continuing to do. Elevating it even higher. That's, as we know, that's how this works, right? We all push the train, and the idea is to keep it moving down the track. And you, more than doing that, I have great appreciation for that. I'll always hold Tulane, that community, all of it, a close place in my heart, our family's heart, all of those things. And I'm glad you're at the wheel. Appreciate you. Really the opportunity to chat today. As you know, as you saw, it is an emotional thing, and always will be. But for real and significant reasons. And in the end, I just want everybody ever involved in it, to have great sense of satisfaction and pride, even though there was loss and pain that came with it. What they did made something better, changed it for a long, long time. And that's significant. And if you could say that at any point in time in your life, that's a wonderful thing. So that's where I'll end it. I appreciate you. Thanks for having us on. Roll wave.
You as well, Rick. Thank you very much. Roll wave. And if you ever need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you, David.